The phone rang at 3:40 in the morning. I've always hated those late night calls, the kind that never bring anything good, only news too awful to wait for sunrise. My hand was shaking as I grabbed the phone on the third ring. Mrs. Bond, this is Leon Hospital. Your son, John, has been admitted with a suspected brain aneurysm. You should come immediately. For a second, it felt like the whole world tipped sideways. I'm 65 years old. I've lived through the loss of my husband 10 years ago. Thought I knew something about grief, but nothing in my life had prepared me to hear that my only child might be dying. John, brilliant, gentle, decent John, wasn't supposed to go before me. That was not how life was meant to work. I showed up at the hospital still in my nightgown under my coat, hair sticking up, hands trembling as I gave my name at the reception desk. A doctor with tired eyes and a serious face led me into one of those small, private rooms they use when they don't want you falling apart in the hallway. The words that came next shattered what was left of my world. Massive aneurysm, no warning signs, nothing anyone could have done. Already gone, already gone. My John was already gone. Time stopped making sense after that. Minutes, hours, it all smeared together while forms were signed and questions were asked and choices no mother should ever have to make were pushed in front of me. It was close to noon when Emma finally walked in. She'd been married to John for 10 years. She breezed into the hospital lobby in oversized designer sunglasses, her glossy hair perfect, her manicure immaculate, tapping irritably at her phone as if she were waiting for a table at a restaurant instead of news about her husband. There was traffic, she said, still staring at her screen instead of at me. And I had to find someone to watch Alex. By then, I had already called Alex's school myself, spoken with his teacher, and arranged for him to stay with his best friend's family for the day. The fact that Emma hadn't even thought to do that she'd left their 8-year-old son with no idea what was happening to his father was, sadly, exactly the kind of thing I'd come to expect from the woman my son married. John is gone, I told her quietly, watching her face, ready to adjust my own reaction to hers. Emma's perfectly painted mouth formed a neat little O of surprise. Her hand flew to her throat in a gesture that might have passed for natural if I hadn't spent years watching her little performances. But he was fine yesterday, she said, her voice catching just enough to sound rehearsed. We had dinner, then he was working in his study. I went to bed early. I didn't even say goodnight. For a split second, something real flickered across her face, regret. Maybe, but it vanished just as quickly, replaced by something harder to read. Relief, calculation, something cold and quiet. Whatever she'd actually felt, it disappeared behind a careful mask of shocked widow. As the day wore on, I watched her step into hallways and corners, whispering into her phone. Whenever someone from the hospital staff came by to ask about arrangements, she drifted away, leaving the decisions to me. You know what he would have wanted better than I do, she said lightly, as if we were picking out a restaurant instead of deciding what to do with my son's body. By early evening, while we waited for John's body to be released to the funeral home, Greg Carpenter arrived. Greg had been John's closest friend since law school and also his personal attorney. His eyes were red, his jaw tight, and when he pulled me into a hug, his grief felt heavy and real. I can't believe he's gone, Greg whispered. I just had lunch with him on Monday. I nodded, unable to get a single word past the pain in my chest. Greg turned to Emma and offered his condolences. She gave a practiced nod, the kind you see at charity events when people are pretending to care. We'll need to meet soon, Greg said then, the professional tone slipping back into his voice. There are some matters in John's will that need timely attention. Emma straightened in her chair at that, dabbing at eyes that were still hidden behind tinted lenses. Of course, she said quickly, maybe tomorrow. I'd like to get everything settled as soon as possible for Alex's sake. The mention of Alex cut through my numbness like a blade. My sweet, sensitive grandson had just lost his father, and his mother was already talking about settling things quickly. Alex should be told in person, I said firmly. I'll go with you to pick him up. That's not necessary, Emma answered, a little too fast. I can handle my own son. She put a faint stress on the word my, and after 30 years as a psychology professor, I didn't miss it. It was a familiar pattern, Emma claiming authority over Alex when it suited her image as devoted mother, while leaving most of the actual parenting to John, and more to me. He adores you, she added, her voice softening in that artificial way I knew too well. He'll need his grandmother more than ever now. It was manipulation dressed up as concern, and she probably thought I couldn't see it. but my entire career had been built on reading people. Emma was already positioning herself, keeping me close for help with childcare while making sure the power stayed firmly in her hands. As we walked out of the hospital, I caught sight of her reflection in the dark glass of a window. She stopped for a moment, straightened her hair, adjusted her coat, checked her face. Then she took out her phone and started another call. For that brief, unobserved instant, her expression wasn't broken or shocked. It was cool, controlled, and calculating, like a chess player deciding on her next move. I turned away, feeling my heart tear open all over again. I had not only lost my son, the best thing I ever brought into this world, but my grandson's future was now tied to a woman who seemed to see his father's death as, at best, an inconvenience and at worst, an opportunity. What I didn't know then was that John had seen this coming. He had recognized what Emma truly was, and he had taken steps, extraordinary ones, to protect his mother and his son from her. In the days that followed, through the haze of grief and funeral arrangements, I would start to see just how far my son had gone to shield us, and just how deep Emma's deception ran. But that night, when I finally walked into my own quiet house, I wasn't thinking about wills or strategies. I clutched an old photo of John as a little boy to my chest and wondered how on earth I was supposed to keep breathing after this. For Alex, I told myself, you have to stay standing for Alex. Something in Emma's behavior had triggered every protective instinct I had left. My grandson had already lost his father. I swore to myself he wasn't going to lose his grandmother too, not while I was still capable of fighting for him. A little after midnight, sitting at my kitchen table, one thought kept circling in my mind. A devastating phone call had blown my world apart, but something about my daughter-in-law's reaction was wrong, off, hollow. What had John discovered about his failing marriage before he died? And what exactly had he done to prepare for what he feared might come after? I didn't realize it then, but my hardest task as a mother hadn't ended with my son's death. It was just beginning. I've been to more funerals than I care to count in my 65 years, and if there's one thing I know, it's that real grief has a look and feel you can't fake. People express it differently. Some curl inward, some lash out, some get very still and quiet, but genuine heartbreak has a weight to it. Sitting in the front pew of the church at John's funeral, I watched a masterclass in performance from my daughter-in-law. Emma was dressed in a sleek black designer dress that managed to be perfectly tasteful while showing off all the right angles. Her hair fell in soft, mournful waves. Her makeup looked understated, but I could tell from the way nothing smudged that she'd gone with waterproof everything. Every so often, she pressed a monogrammed handkerchief under dry eyes, careful not to disturb her eyeliner. She leaned against me now and then, just enough to look like we were joined in shared suffering. He would have loved seeing everyone here, she murmured at one point. John always spoke so highly of everyone. To the people watching us, we must have looked like the picture of united grief, the heartbroken widow and the shattered mother, shoulder to shoulder in sorrow. But I could feel how little of her weight actually rested on me. The minute someone with money or status walked by, her spine straightened, and the grief slipped into the background like a coat she could take off at will. Her eyes never stopped scanning the room. She weighed each mourner the way some people assess a stock portfolio, checking for social capital, influence, income. Her tone shifted just slightly, depending on who she was talking to. Warm and respectful with John's wealthier clients, breezy and distant with his old friends and neighbors. My attention, though, was mostly on the small boy pressed against my other side. Alex sat close to me, his little body shaking off and on with quiet sobs. His grief wasn't tidy or photogenic. His nose was red, his cheeks blotchy, his eyes swollen. Every tear he shed was real. I wrapped my arm around him and handed him tissues as he stared at the closed casket that held his father. "Is Daddy really in there?" he whispered when the pastor paused. "His body is," I said softly, "but the part that made him your dad, the love, the thoughts, who he really was, that part isn't gone. That part stays with you, always." Alex studied the casket for a long moment. "I can still kind of feel him," he said quietly, "like he's watching." "I believe he is," I answered, blinking back a fresh wave of tears. Emma leaned across me suddenly. "Alex, sit up straight," she hissed under her breath. "People are watching." I felt his small shoulders tighten under my arm, shrinking in on himself. Her focus on appearances instead of his heartbreak was exactly the reason John had been leaving Alex with me more and more over the last year. After the service, it felt like a never-ending stream of people came to pay their respects. Colleagues, clients, neighbors, old school friends, they lined up to tell me stories about my son. Your boy helped me keep my house when I got divorced, a woman told me, squeezing my hands. He lowered his FEs when he found out I was struggling and put me in touch with people who could help. John was the only lawyer willing to take my discrimination case, an elderly gentleman said. He cared about justice, not just billable hours. Their words hurt and healed at the same time. My heart was breaking, but hearing how John had lived his values soothed something inside me. I listened carefully and tucked each story away like something precious. One day, Alex would need these memories. Throughout the reception, I noticed Emma slipping into corners with certain people, her voice low and tense. One conversation in particular caught my eye. She was standing very close to a tall, expensively dressed man I'd never seen before. Their heads were bent together. When I moved toward them, they pulled apart smoothly, as if on cue. Susan, this is Richard Harlow, Emma said, all polite smiles. One of John's real estate investment partners. My condolences, Mrs. Bond, he said, shaking my hand briefly. John was a remarkable man. His voice was polite, the words correct, but something underneath felt off, too practiced, too distant. And the way Emma's hand brushed his arm as she introduced him suggested a familiarity that didn't exactly scream strictly business. My professor's mind, the part of me that analyzed human behavior for a living, started quietly filing all of this away. By the end of the day, I was running on fumes. Alex had fallen asleep on a small sofa in one of the funeral home's private rooms, completely spent. I draped his little suit jacket over him like a blanket and watched his chest rise and fall, feeling more protective than ever. That's when Greg approached me again. Susan, he said in a low voice, could we speak privately for a moment? We stepped into a corner out of earshot of the remaining guests. John left specific instructions about a few things, Greg said. I can't go into all of it yet, but he told me to give you one message right away. He looked me directly in the eye. Trust your instincts about Alex. Does that mean anything to you? My gaze went to my sleeping grandson, then to Emma on the far side of the room, checking her makeup in a compact mirror while murmuring a distracted thank you to yet another person offering condolences. Yes, I said slowly. It does. Good, Greg replied. We'll go over everything formally tomorrow at my office. He hesitated, choosing his next words. Arrangements have been made for both of you. Before I could ask what he meant, Emma breezed over, her social smile firmly back in place. Greg, I hope we can get everything wrapped up quickly, she said. I'm thinking of taking Alex away for a while after all this. A healing trip. It would be best for everyone if the estate matters were handled promptly. Of course, Greg answered evenly. My office. Tomorrow at 2. When it was finally time to leave, I gathered Alex into my arms. 8 years old, long legs, limp with sleep. He was heavier than he used to be, but I held him gladly. Emma didn't offer to help, just scrolled through her phone. 17 missed calls, she sighed. So many arrangements to make. What arrangements? I asked, keeping my tone light, as if I were just making conversation. Life goes on, Susan, she said, eyes still on her screen. Bills, accounts, notifications. John handled everything. Now it's all on me, not us. Not we'll figure it out together. Just me. Later that night, she asked if Alex could stay with me to give her space to process. I agreed, but as I tucked him into John's old room, a strange feeling settled in my chest. It felt very much like my son's voice, whispering in my ear, watch, listen, pay attention. We're going to be okay, Alex, I whispered to him as he slept. Somehow, I'm going to make sure we're okay. I had no idea at the time how much that promise would cost me or how right John had been to prepare for a fight. The funeral made one thing painfully clear. My grandson's grief was heartbreakingly genuine, and my daughter-in-law's sorrow was, at least in part, a performance. While I watched Emma's careful act, Greg's quiet warning and John's earlier message about trusting my instincts told me my son had seen danger long before I did. What had he done to shield us? And what was Emma already planning while his body was barely in the ground? John left everything to me. Those were Emma's first words when the will reading took a turn she hadn't expected. For the first time since this nightmare began, her polished calm slipped. We were seated in Greg Carpenter's office the day after the funeral, Emma in a fitted black dress, me in a plain navy suit that suddenly felt too tight around the ribs. Greg sat behind his desk, glasses low on his nose, reading from a thick document. Not exactly, Greg replied, his voice steady. John left you the lake house property, his investment portfolio with Meridian Partners, and a life insurance policy in the amount of $500,000. I folded my hands in my lap and stayed quiet, listening. Nearly $1 million, any reasonable person would consider that substantial. But Emma did not look like a reasonable person just then. She shifted slightly in her chair, lips pressed into a thin line. The family home at 1742 Oakwood Drive, Greg continued, both vehicles and his personal bank account at First National are bequeathed to his mother, Susan Bond. Emma's nails dug into the armrests. That's impossible, she snapped. We bought that house together. It's our marital home. Greg slid a set of documents across the desk. The property was purchased solely in John's name prior to your marriage, he explained. It was never converted to joint ownership. The deed and mortgage both reflect that. I kept my face neutral even as my heart pounded. John had never told me any of this that legally. The house was his alone, and now mine. The 4-bedroom colonial with the big backyard and Alex's treehouse out back. Apparently, I now owned all of it, along with John's Mercedes, his Range Rover, and a bank account I'd never heard him mention. What about Alex's college fund? Emma demanded. John swore he was setting aside money for his education. He did, Greg said. There's a trust specifically for Alex's educational expenses. You are not the trustee. Emma leaned forward, her voice dropping. Then who is? Greg glanced at me. Susan is the trustee of all funds related to Alex's care and schooling. Silence fell over the room. I could almost feel the calculations running behind Emma's eyes. Totals, losses, strategies. This doesn't make any sense, she said finally, modulating her voice into one of hurt confusion rather than pure anger. John and I discussed our estate plans. This is nothing like what we agreed. Greg cleared his throat. The will was updated 3 months ago, he said. John came to me specifically to make these changes. Everything was executed properly and witnessed. 3 months ago. That lined up perfectly with the period when John had been bringing Alex over for more father-son weekends, which I suspected were really escapes from a tense household. Whatever had been happening in that marriage, it had pushed my son to quietly rearrange his entire estate. There must be a mistake, Emma said, turning to me with a practiced expression, hurt, hopeful, just a hint of pleading. Susan, you know John would want his family to stay in the house. You already have your own place. You're not really going to take our home away from Alex, are you? There it was. The suggestion that if I honored my son's very clear wishes, I'd be hurting my grandson, not her, him. I'm just as surprised as you are, I said truthfully. I didn't know any of this. I need time to think and process. Greg finished going through the remaining details, personal effects, charitable donations, pre-planned funeral expenses. All the while, Emma kept one hand in her lap, phone hidden just out of view, her thumb moving occasionally as she texted. Her face stayed composed, but every now and then, her jaw clenched. When the meeting wrapped up, Greg asked me to stay a moment. Emma left with a tight smile and a strained "we'll talk soon" in my direction, clicking away on her heels. Once the door closed, Greg sat back down. There's more, he said quietly. John left this for you. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it, written in John's familiar handwriting. My throat closed up just seeing it. Should I open it now? I asked, fingers trembling. Take it home, Greg advised gently. Read it when you're alone and ready. He hesitated, then added, Susan, John knew exactly what he was doing with these arrangements. Trust that. I nodded and slipped the envelope into my purse. On my way out through the lobby, I spotted Emma standing near the front windows, back turned, phone pressed to her ear. I stopped where she couldn't see me, but I could hear every word. She completely blindsided me, she said, voice low but furious. The house, the cars, even the college fund. No, I don't think he suspected anything. Must have been his mother's influence. Of course I'm going to fight it, Richard. I put 10 years into this family. I'm not walking away with just a vacation house and some insurance money, Richard. So she was already strategizing with that investment partner from the funeral. I slipped out quietly and took the stairs instead of the elevator. My head spun with questions, but the one thing that was finally, painfully clear was this. My son had seen something in his wife that I was only now starting to see, and he had taken serious steps to work around her. Back in my small house, with Alex still at school and the afternoon light slanting in through the blinds, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of his law office stationery. Mom, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. I'm so sorry to leave you with all of this, but there's no one I trust more. My marriage has been unraveling for some time. What started as distance turned into something darker. I've learned things about Emma that scare me for Alex's emotional future and for your safety. I've rearranged my estate to protect you both. The house, cars, and accounts are legally yours, but they're not really for you. They're tools. I wanted to make sure Alex has at least one stable, loving parent figure if I'm gone. Emma will fight you. She'll lie, guilt, charm, and manipulate. Don't tip your hand. Don't let her know what you know. Watch her. Wait. Keep records of everything related to Alex's care. Greg has the rest of my evidence and instructions. He'll help when the time is right. I love you, Mom. You taught me to see people clearly and to think ahead. I'm asking you to use those same strengths now for Alex. John, I pressed the letter against my chest and sobbed, not just from grief but from the realization that even staring down his own mortality, my son had been protecting us. Now my role was unmistakably clear. For John's sake, for Alex's future, I would have to become something I'd never needed to be before, a strategist, an opponent, someone who could smile while playing a very long game with a very dangerous woman. My years of studying human behavior were about to be tested in the hardest way possible. John's will had left me stunned and Emma enraged. My son had quietly shifted key assets into my name and entrusted me with his most precious treasure, his child. His letter confirmed everything my instincts had been whispering. Emma was not just difficult, she was a threat. If I wanted to protect Alex, I would need to stay quiet about what I knew, pretend to be softer than I felt, and wait for her to underestimate me. Grandma, when is Dad coming back? 3 days after the funeral. Alex's question over breakfast almost broke me in half. He sat at the kitchen table in his pajamas, legs swinging, cereal forgotten in his bowl. At 8, he understood the word death, but his heart still insisted on small miracles. Oh honey, I said, setting my coffee cup down and reaching for his hand. Remember what we talked about. Daddy's body couldn't keep working because of the aneurysm in his brain. He can't come back. Alex stared at his fingers on the table. I know, he murmured, but sometimes when I wake up, I forget. I think he's downstairs making pancakes like on Saturdays. I swallowed back tears. I miss him every second, I said. Would you like me to make pancakes on Saturdays now? They won't taste the same, he said, then looked up quickly. But I'd still like them. We were staying at John's house, my house now, according to the will, while I help care for Alex. Officially, Emma said she needed time to handle important paperwork. Unofficially, I suspected she was in a lawyer's office, sharpening her knives. After I dropped Alex off at school, where his teacher had been wonderfully gentle with him, I drove back to the house. Emma's car was already in the driveway. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, having let herself in with her key. She wore a fitted black pantsuit that managed to blend mourning and business in one neat package. Susan, she said, giving me a light kiss on the cheek that felt about as real as a plastic flower. I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about what happens next. Of course, I answered, keeping my tone mild and cooperative, the persona I'd decided to adopt. Can I get you some coffee? Yes, please. She sat at the kitchen island, watching me move around what, legally speaking, was now my kitchen. This is all just a lot, she sighed. The paperwork, the accounts, the decisions. I can only imagine, I said sympathetically, thinking about the conversation I'd overheard with Richard. Tell me how I can help. Her eyebrows lifted just slightly, as if my willingness surprised her. Then she softened her expression into something warm and grateful. You're so kind, Susan, she said. I've been thinking about what would be best for everyone, especially for Alex. Here we go, I thought, keeping my face open and attentive. This house holds so many memories of John, she continued, her voice taking on a delicate tremor. Every room reminds Alex of what he's lost. I think it might be healthier for both of us to make a fresh start somewhere else. I set a mug of coffee in front of her and sat down opposite. You're thinking of moving? I asked calmly. I found a lovely condo downtown, she said, right by the cultural district. Great schools, close to the museum and library. It would be perfect for us. She stirred her coffee with a slow, practiced motion. The thing is, with the way John arranged things, I'll need your cooperation. Oh, I tilted my head slightly, as if I were hearing all of this for the first time. The will is obviously some sort of mistake, she said, her tone tightening before she smoothed it out again. John would never have intentionally put me in such an impossible position. I've spoken with an attorney who says we can avoid drawn-out court battles if you simply transfer the house to me, like John would have wanted. I widened my eyes just a bit, as though seriously considering her suggestion instead of wanting to throw my coffee in her lap. I see, I said slowly. And what did your attorney say about the fact that John updated his will only 3 months ago, specifically to arrange things this way? Annoyance flashed across her face like lightning before she caught it. John wasn't himself in those last few months, she said quickly. He was overworked, stressed. He wasn't thinking clearly about what was best for our family. That must have been hard on both of you, I murmured, as if I were buying the story. It was, she said, adding a dramatic sigh. Which is why I'm sure he would want us to fix this now for Alex's sake. And there it was again. Alex, the justification for everything she wanted. I do understand your concern, I answered. But making big decisions in the middle of grief usually isn't wise. Maybe we should give ourselves a little time to adjust before changing anything major. Her smile tightened at the edges. Of course, you need time, she said. It's just, the condo I found won't be on the market long. It would be easier on Alex if we settled this quickly so he can start healing somewhere new. I recognized the tactic. I'd watched salespeople use it on nervous buyers for years. Create urgency. Force a rushed choice. I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled back at her, looking every bit the tired, cooperative older woman she thought I was. Inside, though, I was already doing what John asked, watching, waiting, and taking notes because if I wanted to protect my grandson, I was going to have to be twice as patient and 3 times as clever as the woman sitting across from me. My years teaching negotiation and human behavior to bright-eyed psychology students turned out to be far more useful in my 60s than I ever anticipated. Why don't we ask Alex how he feels about moving? I suggested gently, as though the thought had simply floated into my mind. He might actually find comfort in staying where he has so many memories of his father. Emma didn't even blink. Children don't always know what's good for them, she replied smoothly. That's why the adults make the decisions, and he's already under enough emotional strain. There it was again, her ability to cast herself as the vigilant mother while making me appear reckless for even considering Alex's feelings. John's words whispered through my mind. She'll try to manipulate you. You're probably right, I conceded with a weary sigh. The flash of relief that crossed her face told me she thought she'd won a point. Let me think about everything for a few days, I added softly. It's all still such a shock. Of course, she said, clearly convinced she'd nudged me closer to her goal. Take the weekend, Susan, then leaning in with that confidential tone she used when she wanted something. I'm worried about finances, with the way things stand. John handled everything. I'm finding credit card bills, the mortgage. She drifted off, fishing. The mortgage she mentioned was now my responsibility, though she didn't seem fully aware of that. I'd be happy to go over the household accounts with you, I said, seeing the opening. We could look at everything together. Her reaction was instantaneous. That's not necessary, she said quickly. I only meant that settling the house issue would free up equity money we need for Alex's education and well-being. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very education fund she spoke of so earnestly was the one John had deliberately placed under my control. She must have assumed I wouldn't catch her subtext, but I'd been studying human intention longer than she'd been shaping her eyebrows. Let's talk more next week, I said, standing up as though reassured rather than alarmed. I should rest a bit before picking Alex up from school. When she finally left, the silence of the house wrapped around me. I replayed every detail of our conversation, watching her moves like pieces on a chessboard. She genuinely believed she was guiding a grieving, fragile older woman into giving up what my son had entrusted to me. Good, let her keep believing that. Then I called Greg. I need to understand exactly what evidence John collected. I told him the moment he answered, and how we can gather more. This is going to take longer and require more finesse than I thought. Emma didn't waste a single opportunity to apply pressure, and I had no intention of wasting an opportunity to build my case. Grandma, Mom says I have to go with her to Miami next weekend, but I don't want to. Alex looked up at me with troubled eyes as I tucked him into bed, 1 week after John's funeral. This was the first I'd heard about any trip, and immediately alarms went off in my mind. Miami? I repeated casually, though my thoughts raced ahead. Well, that sounds like an adventure. Alex hugged his stuffed dinosaur closer. She says her friend Richard has a boat and we're staying at a fancy hotel. but my science project is due Monday. Dad always helped me with my projects. My heart tightened. Did you tell your mom about the project? She said I can skip it. That teachers understand when your dad dies. His voice broke on the word. But Dad wouldn't want me to skip it. He said commitments matter. A child dealing with real grief, clinging to structure while his mother was chasing distraction. You're right, I said softly. Your father believed in following through. Let me talk to your mom tomorrow, okay? Maybe we can find a solution. After Alex drifted to sleep, I dialed Greg at home. He'd insisted I call if anything pressing came up. Miami, he repeated, his voice sharpening. And she's taking Alex with her, I said. Apparently with this friend Richard. A pause. You mean Richard Harlow, Greg said. The developer John mentioned. The one he had serious concerns about. I froze. You knew him? Greg exhaled slowly. Yes. Susan, did you install the home monitoring system we discussed? Yes. Finished today. Cameras in the common rooms. Alerts go straight to my phone. Good, he said. That recording ability may become essential. He hesitated before adding, I'm sending documents from John's private file tomorrow. Do not open them where anyone might see. The next morning, after dropping Alex off, the courier arrived with a thick manila envelope. Inside was a collection of text messages, printouts of messages between Emma and someone saved as RH. The date stretched back 8 months. I shouldn't have been surprised, yet the truth still shook me. The affair had been going on nearly a year. Plans made, cancelled, rekindled. Complaints about John. Comments about feeling trapped. References to Alex not as a beloved son but as a complication. And then messages from just 2 months ago. RH, how long are we keeping this limbo going? You said you were ready, Emma. Patience. Jay's name is on everything. Need to get financials sorted first. Working on it. RH. The Cayman property won't wait. Perfect for a fresh start. Emma. A few more months. Everything will fall into place. I sank into a chair, hands trembling. These weren't just love affair whispers, these were strategic plans to walk away with assets. Another document in the envelope was a private investigator's report commissioned by John himself, photos of Emma and Richard entering hotels together, receipts for expensive gifts, background checks showing shady business on Richard's end. At the very bottom was a handwritten note from John to Greg, dated 3 weeks before his death. Tom hears everything. Not sure what my next move should be. Confronting her might risk my access to Alex. He's my priority. Let's talk Thursday. That Thursday never came. John died on Tuesday. Armed with the truth, I prepared myself before speaking to Emma about Miami. When she arrived Friday to pick up Alex's weekend bag, I asked casually, Alex mentioned a trip to Miami? Just a little getaway, she said, glancing at her watch. Good distraction for him. Though he's worried about missing the science project, I said. You know how John valued academics. Her smile tightened. A weekend off won't hurt him. The school psychologist suggested new experiences. I'm sure, I murmured. Though a boat trip with Richard might be a bit much just now. Alex seemed anxious. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and assessing. I'd touched a nerve. Alex will be fine. Children adapt. They certainly do, I agreed. But sometimes they need familiar routines. I'm happy to keep him here to work on his project if that helps. Her expression flickered, temptation warring with image maintenance. That's thoughtful but unnecessary, she said at last. This is a mother-son bonding weekend. Of course it was. Oh, one more thing, I added lightly. Do you know the password to John's home computer? She didn't even hesitate. No, I never kept track of that, asked Greg. A lie, or a very telling truth depending on how one looked at it. And Alex's class is going on a field trip next Wednesday, I added as she reached the door. They want parent volunteers. I thought you might want to go. Oh, Wednesday? Her expression shuddered. I have an all-day spa appointment. For my mental health. You understand. Of course, I said warmly. Self-care is important. As soon as she left, I called Greg. She's taking Alex to Miami. With Harlow. Good, he said. We'll get the investigator on them. Miami will reveal everything we need. Document Alex's emotional state when he returns. I hated it. I hated using my grandson's pain as evidence, but I understood exactly why it was necessary. Alex came home sunburned, dehydrated, exhausted and emotionally shut down. He stepped inside, dragging his feet, hours later than Emma had promised. How was your trip, sweetheart? I asked, bending to his level. Alex shrugged. The boat made me sick. He's being dramatic, Emma called over her phone. Just motion sickness. The resort was 5-star. He had a wonderful time. Alex glanced at her and said nothing. Can I go to my room? He whispered. Of course. When I noticed he wasn't carrying his backpack, I asked, did Alex forget it? It got wet, Emma said with a dismissive wave. Nothing important. His science project was in that bag. I'll write a note, she added sharply when she saw my expression. Teachers understand. Behind her cool tone was a warning. Don't challenge me. Then she smiled triumphant, almost smug. Oh, and Richard sends his regards. He was disappointed you couldn't join us. My stomach twisted, but I matched her smile. How thoughtful. Upstairs, I found Alex on his bed, staring at a photo of John. He told me everything. He was left with a hotel babysitter both nights. The sitter fell asleep. He woke up frightened and disoriented. Emma didn't answer when he called. Richard made it clear Alex wasn't welcome on the boat. Emma laughed when Richard said kids mess things up. Each detail pierced me, but I kept my voice steady, offering comfort while memorizing every word. You can tell me anything, I whispered, pulling him close. He relaxed into my side. Dad always cared about my feelings. I know, I said, kissing the top of his head. And I'm here, always. After he fell asleep, I documented every detail in the journal Greg told me to keep. Patterns were emerging ugly, undeniable patterns. And over the next 2 weeks, they only grew clearer. Emma began staying out late, leaving Alex with me more often, missing school conferences, forgetting medical necessities, breaking promises, making plans that didn't include her son. The security cameras captured even more, including the night she brought Richard into the house clearly intoxicated while Alex was awake upstairs. And yet, every time she showed up, I played my part. Calm, helpful, mild. Let her think she was winning. 3 weeks after John's death, Emma waltzed and dressed for a date, not mothering. We need to revisit the house situation, she said. Oh good, I replied pleasantly. I've been meaning to ask which items you'd like to keep when I move in permanently next month. Her eyebrows shot up. Move in? I thought we agreed the house should be sold. I don't recall agreeing to that, I said, still smiling. Alex needs stability. His therapist emphasized the importance of familiar surroundings. Her mask cracked for a moment before she slipped it back on. I'm worried about you, Susan. This house is too big. And the mortgage, there is no mortgage, I said lightly. John left it free and clear. A new calculation flickered behind her eyes. She'd underestimated me, and she knew it, but she wasn't done, not even close. Later, while helping Alex with his science project, he looked up at me with the earnestness only a child can muster. Grandma, are you going to live here now instead of Mom? That's an interesting question, I said gently. Why do you ask? She told someone on the phone that you were trying to take the house from her. She said you were being selfish. I kept my tone even. Sometimes adults disagree about things. Your dad just wanted all of us to have safe places to live. He nodded thoughtfully. I want you to stay. You remember my medicine. You make real food. And you help with homework. His simple honesty, his quiet longing for stability solidified everything inside me. This wasn't just about honoring John's wishes anymore. I was fighting for a child who understood, even at 8, the difference between love and performance. I'll do my best to stay close, I promised him, no matter what, and that was a promise I intended to keep. You transfer everything back where it belongs, and in return, I guarantee your visitation rights. Clean, simple, everyone wins. Emma slid the document toward me with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already secured the checkmate. I picked it up slowly, letting my eyes move over the dense legal language that would effectively unravel every protection John had put in place for Alex and me. This is quite thorough, I murmured, buying myself a moment to think. And what about Arizona? If you move, would Alex and I still have our regular visits? Her expression shifted into a carefully arranged look of regret. Well, the Arizona trip may turn into something more permanent, she admitted. Richard has some promising development opportunities out there, and the private schools are exceptional. It would be a fresh start for everyone. A fresh start, far away from me, from John's friends, from anyone who had ever seen behind her performance. I could see her entire strategy snapping into focus. I'll need time to think, I said, folding the document and slipping it into my purse. And I'll probably ask Greg to look it over, since he understands John's wishes. Her smile tightened like a bowstring. I wouldn't involve Greg if I were you. He's Old-fashioned. My attorney assured me this agreement is completely standard. I nodded as though her concerns made perfect sense. Even so, John always told me never to sign anything without proper review. She couldn't object to me honoring John's advice not without revealing her hand, so she forced a polite smile and motioned for the check. Of course, take a few days. But Susan, she added softly, with an unmistakable edge sharpening her tone, this really is the best solution for everyone. Fighting me will only hurt Alex in the long run. The veiled threat landed between us like a stone. She paid for our overpriced meal, likely on one of John's old accounts, and I thanked her as though she'd done me some gracious favor. But as I drove home, my hands shook against the steering wheel. Not from fear, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared, but from anger. From the sheer audacity of her manipulation. From how lightly she treated the idea of uprooting Alex from everything familiar. From how casually she believed she could erase John's legacy. I didn't even take my coat off before dialing Greg. She's planning to move Alex to Arizona permanently, I said. And she offered me a devil's bargain to get the house and accounts back. Greg didn't sound surprised, only satisfied. Perfect. This is exactly what we needed. Bring the document to my office first thing in the morning. It's time for the next phase. Emma had no idea her little performance had given us exactly the ammunition we needed. She actually put this in writing, Greg said the next morning, shaking his head as he highlighted key lines in the agreement. This is practically a confession. We sat in his office with cups of untouched coffee growing cold between us. She's literally stating she'll allow you to see Alex only if you transfer assets that legally belong to you. That's coercion in its purest form. I pointed at another highlighted section. And the Arizona clause? The part about reasonable visitation regardless of primary residence, that, Greg said, marking it in bold yellow, shows forethought. She intends to remove Alex from his support system and from you during the most vulnerable period of his life. Combined with the evidence we've already gathered, it paints a very troubling picture. I leaned back, letting the implications settle. So, what now? Greg's expression turned solemn as he opened a desk drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope marked Emergency Protocol in John's handwriting. My breath caught at the sight of my son's familiar lettering. John left detailed instructions, Greg explained. How to proceed if Emma's behavior threatened Alex's emotional well-being or if she attempted to separate him from you. He carefully opened the envelope. The key component is a petition for emergency custody modification. I blinked. Custody modification? John wanted me to seek custody of Alex? Temporary custody, Greg clarified, based on the evidence of neglect and emotional instability, and considering Alex's needs during grieving, a judge would likely place him with you until a full evaluation is complete. My hands trembled slightly. Greg, I'm 65. Will a court even consider me over his mother? Age isn't a disqualifier, he said firmly. Consistency, emotional stability, and demonstrated involvement matter far more. You've been Alex's primary source of comfort. Emma's current priorities don't meet his needs. He laid out the evidence in organized stacks. My documented journal entries, security footage of Emma's late nights and questionable behaviors, reports from Alex's teacher about missed assignments and conferences, notes from his grief counselor about anxiety and regression, photographs and descriptions from the Miami trip, and now the written proposal, Emma's own hand tying the bow on the case. There's one more thing we need, Greg said. A neutral third-party evaluation of Alex's emotional state. I've arranged for a court-approved psychologist to meet him tomorrow at school. It won't raise suspicion. The thoroughness of John's preparations shattered my heart all over again. He had been gathering evidence, planning contingencies, laying groundwork. He must have felt something shifting long before he ever said a word to me. When do we file the petition? I asked. Assuming the psychologist's report supports our position, we'll file within 48 hours sooner if possible. I nodded slowly, absorbing it. Greg looked at me with surprising tenderness. Susan, are you ready for this? Emma won't go quietly. I thought of Alex's small voice describing the dark hotel room, the babysitter asleep, his mother unreachable, his confusion, his fear, his aching grief. I thought of John's letter. I'm counting on you, Mom. I'm ready, I said. What's our next step? Keep acting exactly as you have been. Don't let Emma see anything has changed. If she asks about the agreement, tell her you're still reviewing the visitation section. That afternoon, Alex and I settled into our normal routine. though my stomach churned with anticipation. He told me quietly about how his mother had snapped at him for calling to say he'd forgotten his lunch. Another entry for my journal. Just after dinner, Greg called. The school psychologist met with Alex today. Her preliminary findings support our petition. He expressed anxiety about being sent to Arizona and referenced you as his primary emotional anchor. Is that enough? I whispered. Combined with our evidence? Yes. I'm filing the petition in the morning. The judge will likely hear it within 24 hours. That night I slept little. But by morning, resolve had replaced fear. At 10:17 a.m., Greg called again. It's filed. The judge has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow at 9. Emma will be served this afternoon. So soon? Emma's Arizona plans make her a potential flight risk. The judge isn't taking chances. Susan, do not meet with Emma privately. Go to a hotel if needed. What about Alex? The petition includes a directive that he stays with you until the hearing. The server will explain it to her. I had barely hung up when my phone rang again. You scheming, manipulative witch. Emma's voice erupted through the speaker with such intensity that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. How dare you try to steal my son? My attorneys are going to destroy you. Destroy you. You'll never see Alex again when this is over. I said nothing, exactly as Greg instructed. Say something, she shrieked. On the advice of counsel, I replied calmly, I can't discuss this with you. I'll see you at the hearing tomorrow. You'll regret this, she hissed and hung up. I exhaled slowly, letting the silence settle. Alex played quietly in the next room, blissfully unaware of the war erupting around him. That evening, as I stirred spaghetti sauce and Alex sprinkled cheese over his bowl, he looked up. Mom sounded mad earlier, he said. Is she mad at me? No, sweetheart, I assured him, heart aching. Grown-ups just get frustrated about work sometimes. He nodded, though uncertainty lingered. She said she'd take me for ice cream tomorrow, but she forgot the last time she promised. Another quiet blow to my heart and another entry for my journal. That night, Greg reviewed final details with me. Tomorrow will be fast, he said. You'll only need to answer the judge's questions honestly. Just stay focused on Alex. I didn't sleep much, but I awoke with a clarity I hadn't felt since John died. Alex watched me zip up my navy suit. Why are you dressed up, Grandma? I have an important meeting, I said gently. Mrs. Wilson will take you to school today. He accepted it easily. Children adapt to so much more than they should have to. At the courthouse, Greg met me with a grim expression. Emma brought in one of the most aggressive attorneys in the city, but the evidence is strong. Inside, Emma looked like a portrait of dignified heartbreak. Hair pulled back, conservative dress, a framed photo of John and Alex placed in front of her. It was all so carefully curated. Her eyes burned with hatred when she saw me. The hearing was grueling. Greg presented our evidence steadily and calmly. Winters countered with accusations that I was obsessed, controlling, overstepping. He painted Emma as a mother struggling under sudden grief, nothing more. When I spoke, I kept my focus solely on Alex. Your Honor, I'm not trying to replace Emma. I'm asking for temporary protection for a grieving child whose needs are not being consistently met. Judge Carlton listened, stone-faced. After an hour, she left to review the evidence. When she returned, her ruling was swift. Sufficient cause for emergency intervention has been established. Temporary guardianship of Alex Bond is granted to Susan Bond for 60 days. I exhaled, trembling. Across the room, Emma's mask shattered. This isn't over, she spat. You have no idea what's coming. Greg stepped between us. All communication goes through counsel now. When Emma finally let her attorney steer her out of the hallway, I leaned back against the cool wall, as if my legs had suddenly remembered they were 65. The weight of what had just happened crashed over me. The judge had given me temporary custody. My son's worries, his careful planning had just been confirmed in a courtroom by a woman in a black robe with the power to change lives. Alex was safe, at least for now. What happens next? I asked Greg, trying to keep my voice from shaking. We pick Alex up from school, he said gently. We explain things with the help of his counselor, as simply and kindly as we can. Then we focus on building a routine that feels safe and predictable. He put a steady hand on my shoulder. The hardest part is still ahead, Susan, he added quietly. But today he's protected. And for the moment, that was enough. 6 weeks later, Alex and I were sitting side by side on the porch swing, the chains creaking softly with each small sway. His feet still didn't quite reach the floor. They swung back and forth, toes hovering above the boards. He watched the driveway, where Emma's car should have been pulling up for her supervised visit. She hadn't shown for the last two. "Grandma, is Mom ever coming back?" he asked suddenly. That question felt like a knife. "Your mom is going through a hard time right now," I said carefully, using the language the family therapist had suggested. "She loves you, but sometimes adults struggle with big changes and don't know how to handle them very well." Alex nodded slowly, thinking that over. "Like when Dad died and she started going out all the time," he said matter-of-factly. His insight still surprised me sometimes. "We underestimate children constantly." "Something like that," I said, pulling him closer. "How are you feeling about everything?" He frowned, kicking lightly at the air as if that might help him think. "Sad sometimes," he said, "but not scared anymore." "Scared?" I asked gently. "When Mom talked about Arizona," he admitted, "I was scared all the time. I didn't want to leave my school and my friends. And you. And I didn't like Richard. He always talked to me like I was a baby, or like I wasn't even there." Every one of those words slid straight into my mental file cabinet, another set of details to record when I wrote in my journal that night. The court-appointed evaluator had been talking to Alex each week, and to both Emma and me separately. The full assessment would be on the judge's desk soon. The final custody hearing was just days away. Those 6 weeks had been both grueling and strangely healing. When we first explained the new arrangement, Alex had been confused and upset. The counselor had framed it as special time with Grandma while Mom works on grown-up problems, which softened the blow. Then the consistency did its quiet work: regular meals, bedtime at a reasonable hour, homework done at the kitchen table, chores, weekends that actually felt like weekends. Slowly, the fear in his eyes faded. Emma, on the other hand, was all volatility and theatrics. The first visits were full of stiffness and resentment. She stayed glued to her phone, only looking up to ask Alex leading questions like, "You miss me all the time, right? And are you happy staying here?" Her eyes flicking toward the supervisor every time. Then she started canceling visits 2 in a row, urgent work issues. When she came back, she arrived with armfuls of toys and promises of big trips and special outings that never seemed to materialize. The worst visit happened 3 weeks earlier. She'd shown up with Richard in tow, as if the court order about who could and could not be present didn't apply to her. When the visitation supervisor told her that Richard couldn't join, she'd exploded, turned on her heel, and stormed out. She left Alex standing there, clutching the small gift he'd made for her at school, his face crumpling as he realized there would be no visit at all. She hadn't shown up for the last 2 sessions since. "Do you think you'll be ready to talk to the judge next week?" I asked quietly, referring to the in-chambers conversation Judge Carlton had planned. Alex shrugged. "Miss Abernathy said I just have to tell the truth about what makes me feel safe and happy." "That's exactly what you need to do," I said, even though the thought of my grandson talking to a judge about safety made my stomach twist. The next morning, my phone rang earlier than usual. Greg's voice came through brisk, but there was a tightness underneath it. "Susan, we've got a problem. Emma's attorney just filed a motion to dismiss the case. They're demanding a full return to the original custody arrangement. No restrictions, no supervision." I gripped the phone harder. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming you influenced Alex to make statements against his mother, that the evidence was exaggerated or misinterpreted. They're trying to recast everything she's done as normal grief behavior." My heart sank. "Do they have a real chance?" "Normally I'd say not much," he said. "Our documentation is strong. The psychologist's evaluations are clear." He paused. "But there's a wrinkle. The motion is going before Judge Blackwell. He happens to be an old golf buddy of one Mr. Richard Harlow." The meaning hit me like a cold wave. Money and connections. The oldest story in the book. "What do we do?" I asked. "I'm filing counter motions right now," Greg said. "But there's something else. Our investigator found that Emma and Richard have put deposits down on property in the Cayman Islands." I went very still. "The Cayman Islands?" I repeated. "Limited cooperation with U.S. custody orders," Greg said quietly. "If Emma regains custody even temporarily, she could take Alex out of the country. Bringing him back would be extremely difficult." "She wouldn't," I started to say and stopped. Of course she would. Emma had shown me, again and again, what her priorities were. I'm asking for an emergency review with Judge Carlton as soon as she's back from medical leave, Greg continued. Meanwhile, write everything down. Every call, every text, every reaction from Alex. Don't assume anything is too small to matter. That evening, while Alex worked on a school project about family traditions, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. We need to talk. No lawyers. Tomorrow, PM, come alone or no deal. I forwarded the message to Greg right away. Do not meet her alone, he said. This is her trying to go around proper channels. I figured, I answered. But if there's even a chance she's willing to resolve this in a way that benefits Alex, I need to hear it. We compromised. I would go, but I wouldn't really be alone. Greg would be nearby, out of sight but close enough to hear, and I'd record the conversation as our state's laws allowed. The park was quiet when I arrived. A few mothers with strollers wandered near the playground. The river moved steadily past, unconcerned with human drama. Emma was sitting on a bench, back straight, sunglasses on, every hair in place. Thanks for coming, she said as I approached. I'm sure your guard dog told you not to. I'm here for Alex, I said simply, sitting at the opposite end of the bench. If there's a way to help him, I'm listening. For a while, we just sat there watching the water. When she finally spoke, her voice was flatter than I'd ever heard it. I'm dropping the custody case, she said. All of it. I blinked. That was not on my list of expected outcomes. What do you mean? I mean, she said, taking off her sunglasses, revealing dark circles under her eyes. I'm signing over full custody to you. No more supervised visits. No more hearings. No more evaluations. You get everything, Alex. The house. The whole package. I studied her carefully. Emma never did anything this dramatic without a reason. Why? I asked. Because I'm moving to Grand Cayman next month, she replied, like she was telling me she'd changed hairdressers. Richard got development rights on a major resort. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We'll be there at least 3 years. And Alex? I asked, even though I already knew. She gave a small, practical little shrug. Alex needs what the evaluators keep harping on. Stability, structure. I can't provide that right now. Not while I'm relocating and launching a multi-million-dollar project. Her emotional distance took my breath away more than any screaming would have. So you're just walking away? I said quietly. She lifted her chin. I'm making the responsible choice. I'm putting his needs before my own for once. Isn't that what everyone's been nagging me about? You're not putting his needs first, I thought. You're just done being inconvenienced by them. But I kept that to myself. What do you want from me? I asked instead. There must be something. A clean exit, she said immediately. No more hearings. No more digging into finances. No more investigators. You sign what my attorney drafts, I sign over my parental rights, and we all move on. And the house? John's accounts? I asked, more for clarity than concern. She waved a hand as if brushing away a cobweb. Keep them. Richard and I will be dealing in numbers that make that look like grocery money. As she laid out her terms, I sat there, nodding, listening, folding my hands tightly in my lap. Inside, I could feel a mix of relief, sadness, and a strange sense of awe. John had seen this. Maybe not every detail, but he had known who she was, at her core. A week later, I sat in Judge Carlton's chambers while she read through the voluntary custody agreement Emma had signed the day before boarding a plane with Richard. This is unusual, the judge said frankly, glancing up at me over the document. Miss Jensen is surrendering almost all parental rights, retaining only narrow visitation at your discretion. She feels it's best for Alex while she relocates abroad, I said, using the bland wording Greg and I had rehearsed. Judge Carlton's eyes told me she understood more than she was saying. And you're prepared to assume full legal guardianship of your grandson at your age, Mrs. Bond? Without hesitation, I answered. He needs consistency, love, and a connection to his father. I can give him all three. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded and signed. Based on the totality of the evidence and Miss Jensen's voluntary relinquishment, custody of Alex Bond is hereby granted to Susan Bond. Visitation and support as outlined. Outside the courthouse, with the papers in my bag and the afternoon sun on my face, I finally let out the breath I felt I'd been holding for months. Alex was at home with Mrs. Wilson, helping her bake cookies, blissfully unaware that his whole future had just shifted again this time in his favor. I think John would be proud, Greg said quietly as we walked to our cars. He did everything he could to protect his son. Then he trusted the only person he knew would finish the job. 6 months later, on a cool autumn afternoon, Alex and I knelt in the backyard, hands dirty from planting John's favorite flowers. We'd built a little memorial garden with a stone bench and perennials that would return each year, a place where Alex could talk to Dad whenever he wanted. "Do you think Dad knew Mom was going to leave?" Alex asked, packing soil around a small rose bush. The question hit me right in the chest. "I think your dad knew that sometimes grown-ups make choices based on what they want," I said carefully, "instead of what their kids need. And he wanted to make sure you always had someone who put you first." Alex considered that for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I miss Dad every day," he said, "but I don't miss how it was after he died, when Mom was mad all the time or gone." "I know," I murmured, pulling him into a side hug. "Your dad made sure you'd be taken care of, and I intend to honor that for as long as I'm here." That evening, after I tucked him into bed, I sat in John's old study, now our shared space, half office, half homework zone, and opened a small box Greg had given me after the paperwork was finalized. Inside was a single envelope marked, in John's writing, "When it's resolved." "Mom, if you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't. You've protected Alex from a situation I could see falling apart, but didn't have time to fix." I watched Emma pull farther away from me, from our family, from her responsibilities as a mother. When I learned about Richard, I realized Alex would eventually be caught in the crossfire of her new life. "I'm sorry for the burden. I know it isn't fair to ask you to step back into full-time parenting at your age, but I also know you'd never hesitate. You never have." Alex couldn't ask for a better guardian, or a fiercer protector. Tell him real stories about me, not just the shiny parts. Tell him how I messed up, how I tried to make things right, how sometimes we see the truth too late, but we do the best we can with what time we have. I love you both more than I can say. John, I pressed the letter to my chest and really cried for the first time in a long time. Not just for what we'd lost, but for the trust my son had placed in me, and for the strange, unexpected life we were building because of it. Time has a funny way of sneaking past you when you're busy helping a child grow back into himself. 3 years later, Alex burst through the front door like a gust of wind, taller now, shoulders starting to broaden, the baby softness gone from his face. "Grandma, I got the lead in the school play," he shouted, dropping his backpack and thrusting a stapled script at me. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took the packet. "Our Town," I read. "George Gibbs? Oh, that is a big deal. I'm so proud of you." "Miss Larson said Dad played George, too. Did you know that?" he asked, eyes bright. "Yes, I did," I said, smiling. "I still have the program up in the attic." He was so nervous he almost forgot his lines at the dress rehearsal. "You're following right in his footsteps." Alex grinned. Then his expression shifted, thoughtful. "Do you think we should tell Mom about the play?" he asked. The question didn't surprise me. Emma had slowly faded to the edges of his life. Her promise calls had become rare, then infrequent birthday messages, then nothing at all. The support checks still showed up like clockwork, routed through attorneys, but the woman herself had disappeared into her new life. "We can email her the dates if you'd like," I said gently. "It's your decision." He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "She didn't answer when I wrote her about the science fair," he said quietly. "She's probably somewhere with Richard anyway." From Greg, we knew the basics. Emma and Richard had married, expanded their resort projects into Thailand, lived the glossy life she'd always wanted. No mention of coming back, no requests for longer visits, just automatic bank transfers and legal updates. "Whatever you choose is fine," I told him. "You're allowed to decide who you want to share things with. I think I just want you there," he said. "And the Wilsons, and Uncle Greg." That's enough. It was more than enough. As he bounded upstairs to start his homework, I moved into the kitchen to start dinner, pausing to straighten the photos on the fridge. Alex with his science trophy, Alex in his karate uniform, Alex covered in paint from an art project. Little slices of a life that was full and growing. The road here hadn't been smooth. That first year had been rocky. Nightmares, anger, school struggles, tears. Hard questions like, why doesn't Mom call? And did I make her mad? And would she have stayed if Dad hadn't died? With the help of a wonderful child psychologist, we walked through the pain instead of around it. I learned to say, "You didn't," 'cause this more times than I could count. I learned to be honest without being cruel, to explain that sometimes grown-ups have limits they don't admit, and that those limits are about them, not about the worth of the child left behind. Now, at 11, Alex was thriving. Straight A's, friends, theater, soccer, a laugh that came easily. The house had fully become our house. His drawings shared the walls with my watercolor experiments. His cleats sat beside my gardening clogs by the door. Our lives had woven together in a way I never could have predicted when that phone rang at 17 a.m. years ago. At 68, I found myself busier and more alive than I'd been in a long time. I still had my aches and pains, sure, but I also had carpools, school events, lines to rehearse, dinners to cook, a boy to raise. I even started dipping a toe back into dating a kind, gentle widower from community theater who knew better than to rush anything. As I chopped vegetables, my phone buzzed with a text from Greg. Court approved the college fund restructure. Everything's secure for Alex's education. Just like John planned. I stood there for a moment, knife in my hand, letting that sink in. John's planning had reached years beyond his own life. Despite all of Emma's attempts to gain control, that money was now locked away for one purpose: Alex's future. I thought about the strange path we'd taken, the loss, the fights, the hearings, the late-night journaling sessions, the anxiety, the tiny victories. And then I thought about tonight's dinner with Mrs. Wilson's lasagna, Alex's excited chatter about the play, and the quiet, steady comfort of a home that felt truly ours. This wasn't the life I'd expected to have in my late 60s. But as I set the table for two, I knew, deep down, that it was a good life, a hard-earned life, a life my son had cracked open with his foresight and his trust. Alex's true inheritance wasn't the house or the accounts or the trust funds. It was this: a safe home, honest conversations, a community of people who truly loved him, and the knowledge that his father had moved heaven and earth to keep him protected even from beyond the grave. Not the ending any of us would have written, but the one we had, and we'd turned it into something solid and kind and beautiful.